last year, there came a point where our mayor in the city of Williamsport had called on the newspaper to ask me to convene a grand jury to discover what is the source of heroin and how can we do something about it. And in the process of educating the community that that's not really the reason why we impanel grand juries, I, along with one of my colleagues, Judge Mark Lavecchio, who we do the criminal cases in Lycoming County, decided we needed to do something publicly about it. So I'm actually in my 19th year as a common pleas court judge. 17 of those 19 years I've been sitting criminal. I know County Detective Scott Henry. Actually, I first met him when he was a member of the Williamsport Bureau of Police, and then he went on to work with the state police. But I've been a public defender, an assistant district attorney. I've worked in the criminal justice system in Lycoming County for almost 30 years. And it was just, for me, a no-brainer, also being the drug court judge. We start our 17th year next month, to just come out and say, let's come together as a community to stand and talk about this issue and what we can do. Because your mayor's absolutely right. There's shame, there's an acknowledgement that it's not a disease, that it's a moral failing. And the first thing that, as a community, you need to do is you need to come to the agreement that it is a disease, just as high blood pressure, diabetes is, and where we wouldn't think of depriving somebody treatment for diabetes, for high blood pressure, for high cholesterol. In this state, it's very difficult to get drug and alcohol treatment at times. And so the easiest way, unfortunately, is to bring people into the criminal justice system. And how do we do that? Well, the first easiest way is to put them in jail, because then presumably they can't have access to the controlled substance. So then they go through detox at the county prison. But anyway, we had our first meeting in September to say, all right, community, are you interested? What are we going to do about this? And through the process, we formulated on a county-wide basis a committee, a Lycoming County Heroin Taskforce. And our the four, I guess, prongs, the four emphasis, or the 4 points of emphasis that we have are prevention, treatment, education, and enforcement. Because as the drug court judge, I come from the perspective that prevention is effective, that it is what we need to do first, that treatment is effective, and that people do recover. And in the majority of the situation, you're sitting next to somebody who's had an addiction problem that you're not going to know, because it doesn't churn your skin yellow if you have a liver problem, that's what happens, or it doesn't cause you to limp when you have a joint problem. It's something that you keep to yourself usually, unless you do participate in 12-step meetings. And what we needed to do is destigmatize it and have people be willing to come to the table to discuss what can we do about this. And so what we're trying to do and have been continuing to do is get buy-in across all different parts of the community, whether it be the medical community, the faith-based community, education. We have 7 school districts in Lycoming County, and all the superintendents participate in the education committee. We have an offshoot of that education committee which has youth. It's primarily young people who are members of their Students Against Destructive Decisions chapters at their relative schools. We have, as I said, the faith-based community. We have law enforcement. Number of police officers, the district attorney is the subcommittee chair of that group, to talk about ways in which we can support enforcement, just as your chief said. Driving past a house that you know has traffic repeatedly at it, or seeing someone passed out in a vehicle, driving past that is not what's called for now. You need to do something about it. You need to call 911, because that phone call, let me just give you an example. We have people that are dumped off at the parking lot of McDonald's and Dairy Queen in South Williamsport, where Little League World Series is held. First time they ever use drugs, they use it with a quote-unquote friend. Friend panics because now they are dying, and they drop them off in the parking lot. Sometimes they call 911, sometimes they don't. But on the situations that don't, now those businesses routinely patrol their parking lots just to make sure that there's nobody in the parking lot. Can you imagine that? Being a little kid, coming back from your baseball game with your parents, going through the line at the Dairy Queen, and seeing somebody looking like they're asleep in their car, and then you read about it in the paper the next day that they passed away, that they died from an overdose. That's what we're dealing with in Williamsport. But anyway, we have human services, which we have 3 primary treatment providers in Lycoming County that provide services for drug and alcohol as well as mental health, because there also is a mental health component to this. We are seeing, especially in treatment courts, we are seeing an awful lot of people medicate their mental health issues with alcohol or controlled substance. So they're co-occurring disorders. And that's a unique population of people that is even more difficult to find treatment for. So what we have been doing as part of the task force is to be able to get people to talk, to come to the table and talk. In fact, when I came in, Lynn was saying, I saw your picture in the paper, and yes, I threw out the first pitch for the Crosscutters on Tuesday because it was Charitable Tuesdays, and our SCA, West Branch Drug and Alcohol Abuse Commission, was able to get us a Tuesday, and because I'm the chairman, I had the great good fortune of throwing out the first pitch, and I think there was serious money on whether or not I was going to bounce it, which I love to disappoint people, and I didn't bounce it. But I'll do anything to have people talk about this. And that's why when Lynn called, or emailed, I should say, to say, hey, would you come up? Sure, I would love to, because it's a problem. When Mondays, every other month, I do formal court arraignment. Cases are held by the MDJ. They're bound over to court. First time they see a common pleas court judge is in front of me or Judge Lavecchio on Mondays. And I've had a number of kids who are from Mansfield who come down to Williamsport, and they shoot up and they don't make it up 15. Sometimes they do, and they tell me that their favorite place of choice to use is the parking lot of Walmart's in Mansfield. So be on the lookout for syringes in the parking lot. Be on the lookout for people. I pulled into the Wendy's by our Walmart in Montoursville and smelled marijuana coming out of the car. And you better believe I'm dialing 911 and I'm reporting people. Because the only way to send a message is to not solve the problem, because I don't think we're ever going to solve the problem, but make a dent. Make a serious effort on this, is letting people know we will not tolerate this behavior in our community. And how do we do that? Just like the chief said, you call, you tell them what's going on. You don't have to tell them who you are, or if you do, you know they're not going to tell your name because they want to keep you participating in watching out for your neighbors, watching out for yourself. We have also discovered, unfortunately, because of the shame factor with drug and alcohol use, is that families are very reluctant to report their loved ones or to encourage them for treatment. So how many times have perhaps you lived with someone and discovered that in your purse, all that loose change you used to have doesn't exist anymore? How you thought you had your grandmother's locket in your upstairs dresser drawer and it's not there? Or perhaps that medication that you were saving for a rainy day because you only needed 3 pills and you still had 7 more is now suddenly no longer in the cabinet to the right or the left of your kitchen sink, or not in your bathroom cabinet. People don't call. So what happens is I get to see these people when they've committed multiple burglaries. Because when they were calling for help, the parents, the family was afraid. They were embarrassed. They were ashamed of admitting that there was a problem. But just like we said, it's not a moral failing. It's a disease. And just as you wouldn't deprive a diabetic of insulin, and you wouldn't deprive those of us who take high blood pressure medication with our drug of choice to control our high blood pressure, you can't deprive them of the treatment that they need, because that last time you see them walking around may be truly the last time. Because one of the things that we also discovered, because as we may be a source city for other communities, our source city is Philadelphia, the heroin is very pure, and sometimes it's laced with fentanyl or other drugs that are equally as toxic. And there's nothing we can do about it. There are young people who are trying heroin on a whim because they hear about it from their friends and they die the first time they use it. I've been doing drug court, like I told your mayor, I've been doing drug court now. We start our 17th year in Lycoming County. And I think drug court has made a difference all throughout the Commonwealth as well as the United States, because what it does is, many instances when you go to a county prison, there's not a whole lot of drug and alcohol treatment in the prison. When you're in treatment court, that's our first priority, is making sure that people are held accountable for what they did, but we reinforce their positive behaviors by going to meetings, participating in treatment, by celebrating them. I thought it was wonderful that you celebrated the mayor's 23 years of living in recovery, because that's what we do on a regular basis every other week, or every week in treatment court, because sometimes it's just a little bit of motivation, a little bit of positive reinforcement in a life of a person who's never succeeded at anything, that keeps them going, that keeps them doing the right thing, that keeps them away from those people, places, and things that they know they absolutely have to stay away from, but they can't, because that's all they know. They grew up in a household where their parents showed them how to roll their first joint when they were 8. They grew up in a household where alcohol was freely consumed at any hour of the day or night. Sometimes alcohol is more prevalent than food, or even a loving embrace, a hug, or kind words. So that's what people are growing up knowing. So treatment courts are a way to break that cycle as well. So I think it's wonderful that you all are here, talking, listening to all of our perspectives on this issue. I don't know if I can give, I'm not familiar with your community. I know Williamsport from living there, as I said, for so long. And I knew that in our community, you basically had to hit people over the head with it. You can't be subtle. You can't be shy. You got to just keep plugging away. You got to keep bringing it up. So you go to the baseball game. We have town meetings, and what I try to do on town meetings is bring something different. Every time I'm out and they think, that's just Judge Bud's doing her thing. No, every time we come out, we have something different. For example, there are still people in our community that think it's somebody else's problem. Or, worst case scenario, it's Williamsport's problem. It's a black inner city problem. Our SCA sees the face of heroin as a 19 to 25-year-old white male. That's pretty much that person that we see. We know that the first time an individual uses alcohol, they're about the age of 8, and they first experiment with drugs at the age of 13. So middle school is where we are attacking the problem. Our PACE surveys tells us that too, that's where we want to start, is in middle school. And then, so what we did was when we had our town meeting in the eastern part of the county, I brought the chiefs of police from that side of the community to remind people that you may not think it affects you, but when you go to the mall, which is Target, which is Sam's Club, millions of dollars is stolen from these retail merchants to support the drug habit. Open people's eyes. How about, I was born in Philadelphia and I grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs, so I have not lived in this community but for the time I've been here since 1986. And where I grew up, because my parents were born and raised in Philadelphia, I always locked my car. In fact, still to this day, I live in the city of Williamsport, I just lock my car in my locked garage. There are people in Muncie and Hughesville and Montgomery in the eastern part of our county that store their firearm in their car. And they wonder why it goes missing. Because there are addicts on the street that are looking for something quick to trade, and you better believe they've hit the jackpot when they find a gun. And guns and drugs are the most dangerous combination because, as your district attorney can tell you, as MDJ Carlson can tell you, that when you have a gun and drugs and you're found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, that could be a 5-year mandatory state prison sentence. That's how serious the situation is. We have, I'm sure you read about us in Williamsport, all the shootings that we have, a large part of them are people involved in drugs or involved in the sale of drugs. So that was the eastern part of the county. The western part of the county, we just spoke to the Jersey Shore School District. We participated in their Act 80 in-service day. And one of the most, and let me just say one more thing and then I'll pass it along to somebody else because believe me, I could talk all night, is that how many people here have a gun at their house? Raise your hand. Okay, I don't. How many people lock that gun? Raise your hand. Just about everybody, fair amount of people, and I'm assuming those that don't lock their gun have no one at the house that is less than 21 years old. How many people have prescription medication in their house? Raise your hand. How many people lock that prescription medication up? I got 1.5 people. But you realize that that prescription medication with the problems that we're seeing right now is just as deadly as the firearm that you secure. So think about that when you think that it's somebody else's problem. Because I picked out where your medicine was too, didn't I? Next to your kitchen sink or in your bathroom. So when one of your son or daughter's friends comes over to the house, they know where it is to live. So support your prescription drug take-back days too. I'll bet your district attorney or your sheriff has a box that as long as the courthouse is open or their office is open, you can bring your drugs there. I think we just had a take-back day where just in the city of Williamsport, they received over 250 pounds of drugs. And why is this important? Because now kids have farm parties, P-H-A-R-M. What they do, the price of admission is a handful of pills, and they throw it in a bowl. And then when everybody's in, they lock the door, and then they take whatever they want. Oh, that pink one looks good. They take that. Maybe they like the light blue one, and they take that. And for all they know, they have now sealed their fate, that they're going to die. So if you don't need that prescription medication, get rid of it, surrender it, so that way it doesn't encourage people to come and take it. Thank you again very much, Lynn, for inviting me.